Good evening, Julian, and thank you very much for being on Le Grand Journal. So, what can happen to get you out of here?
I don't know precisely. We're in an interesting situation, which is a little bit like the World Cup game between Ecuador and London, which is it's a stalemate formally. Informally, it's more interesting. There's political developments in 3 different countries which affect the situation. In fact, one way of looking at what is occurring is that there is a triangle. So you have the US, UK and Sweden. And in this triangle, I am in a legal no man's land. Mm-hmm. And what is necessary is just to cut the connections between any one of these 3 points. And to do that with the correct political pressure, so the law, the international law, is obeyed.
I want to know if you feel completely safe here.
Not completely, but there was a standoff last year where the British government surrounded the embassy with police and threatened to force their way in. It was quite a serious matter, and there were leaks from the British Foreign Commonwealth Office that they would actually go in. Mm-hmm. And in response to that, the Ecuadorian government moved forward its asylum decision and formally gave me asylum. At that moment, the world community came together and also condemned what the British were doing. And not a single country supported the UK in that matter. Since that point, I think it's unlikely that the British government will forcibly enter the embassy.
Tell me about your situation here. What is your freedom of movement? For example, for how long didn't you feel the rain?
The rain, well, I mean, it is a personally difficult situation. There are people in situations of greater difficulty. It is similar to those people who, who are confined for very long periods. Mm-hmm. Physically, the most difficult thing is the sun. I've only seen 20 minutes sun in the last 2 years when I went out on the balcony to give a talk. Mm-hmm. But intellectually, of course, I can still understand the rest of the world. I have internet connection here. Mm-hmm. So I can do the basic elements of my work, and that is a relief to me.
Yeah. The British policy keep watch on you 24 hours a day, and actually it costs a lot of money. It's £5 million a year. Could this be a way out because you cost too much to the British government?
It's an interesting phenomenon. It does show how much political prestige there is in the conflict between the states. Mm-hmm. That the UK has admitted to spending now more than $10 million, £6 million surrounding the embassy with police. But it's also come out that it's been using GCHQ, the British intelligence service, and the National Security Agency put me on its manhunting list. So there's quite a lot of expenditure. It is something that obviously I need to be careful about in my work, that so much intelligence expenditure is being placed on the embassy.
If you could live here, where would you choose to go?
I'd choose to visit my family, who I haven't seen in a long time.
But would you set in a particular country, like, I don't know, Brazil, France?
Well, what I quite liked doing before is that, I could go to different places. I have lived in Paris, I have lived in Australia and Africa, many different places. It becomes boring after a while, so it's nice to be able to go from one place to another.
On June 19th, it will be exactly 2 years that you've been here in the Ecuador embassy. What is your state of mind at this moment? Are you combative? Are you resigned? How do you feel after 2 years here?
I question this. So I think I'm determined. Yeah. And there is something about when you're exposed to particular forms of injustice that makes you more determined and not less. And that seems to have been the case with Chelsea Manning, one of my alleged sources who was sentenced to 35 years in prison in the United States. And I hear from his legal team that what really made the decision whether he would cooperate with them or not, providing evidence against us, is that they tried to torture him. And so in response to that, he refused to cooperate because it was unjust. And so this is a situation where the lack of justice, where you feel it personally and you feel it on behalf of your family, it creates an anger that keeps you warm.
What is this exile like for you? Is it an experience, a trial, a lesson, or your comeuppance?
It's definitely an experience to begin with. I remember when I was first placed into solitary confinement in prison, that, well, I thought actually I was rather excited, and in some ways, intellectually at least, looking forward to it, that it was going to be a challenge, and I would have to think carefully, and I enjoy that kind of thing, and so, well, yeah, it was difficult, and I suppose overall I didn't enjoy it, but intellectually at least I did. And the same thing here for the first few months, but now it becomes quite routine, too routine.
The worst thing that could happen to you is to be sent to America. Do you think that Obama's politics towards the whistleblowers is the worst?
It is the worst,
yes.
And that's statistically provable. The Obama administration has initiated more prosecutions against journalists and whistleblowers, not just than any previous president, but more than all previous presidents in US history put together. In fact, more than twice as many. That's the administration of Barack Obama.
And in terms of control and propaganda, which one would you choose in between Obama and Putin?
I don't know. For my sort of work, it is hard to say. I mean, if I was in the United States, I would probably end up like Chelsea Manning, in prison for 35 years.
Yeah.
If I was doing the same thing in relation to the Russian government, I imagine I'd end up in a pretty similar situation if I was in Russia. So we can look at it a slightly different way, which is for all the domestic problems that Russia has, it is quite a small player on the international stage with one base outside the former Soviet Union in Syria, whereas the United States has over 1,000 military bases. So when the US goes wrong, more than 100 countries go wrong because of their close relationships with the United States.
But how do you understand the Russian support to someone like Edward Snowden, for example?
It seems to be, it's a geopolitical position. The Russians have seen the bad end of the United States, and so they have some sympathy with people who are exposing it. And it's good that they gave him asylum. It was the right thing to do. Countries in Western Europe should have done it. I mean, I was involved in managing that whole process, and France did not give Edward Snowden asylum. In fact, it participated in the downing of President Evo Morales' jet, trying to stop a possible exfiltration of Edward Snowden from Russia. So it's a sad indictment, actually, on the European Union, that it did not feel independent enough. It did not feel that it could live up to the virtues that are expressed in its own charter to protect the rights of Edward Snowden because of its relationship with the United States. Russia is an independent player, so it felt that it could do so.
I just come back for a second on your personal status. You have become a cult figure all over the world, and you have followers, you have supporters. What kind of things do they send you? Messages just to support you on an everyday basis?
Some are very impressive. So I've been here 2 years now, and every single day there are people gathered together outside in the afternoon to protest what is going on without fail. That's quite impressive. But in terms of the other support, I mean, what's most significant and practical is, of course, the financial support. But people also engage in letter writing and giving us information also is quite important.
Do you also get weird requests, like
we get
people who want to get married to you? Or?
We get all the usual very crazy stuff. There was one the other day where someone said that she was involved with Keanu Reeves, and that she sympathised with my position because the British government was persecuting her, but also Keanu Reeves was as well.
I see. It's frightening, you know?
You get an interesting spectrum of
Yeah.
people across the world, and you can see the mental health problems in many different countries. But I feel a bit sorry, a bit concerned actually for those people, but also some funny stuff. I mean, people send me jokes as well, which is much nicer.
You have lots of people visiting you, and a wide range of people, from Jean-Luc Mélenchon, Eva Joly in France, or Lady Gaga, or Oliver Stone. Are they very important to keep your spirits up?
Well, those characters that you just spoke about, they're important because they're political players.
Yeah.
And so WikiLeaks as an organisation, me personally in my situation, of course we look for political alliances and political support to deal with the problems that we're dealing with. So in some ways, yes, it's interesting to meet famous people, but it's work actually. There is interesting phenomena when you're in this position, and it's true for all people who are well known, which is when a person comes to see you, it's probably not for you. They're coming to see you because
You're a symbol.
you're a symbol, but actually they probably want something. They probably want some kind of business deal, or they want you to do an interview, or they want you to do something. So there is a rather unfortunate narrowing of human interaction that comes with fame, which is quite toxic. And I suppose most people who are well known will tell you about this. In my situation, it's a bit more difficult because I also have a superpower who's trying to do something pretty bad to our organisation. So we have to be careful about dealing with people.
Yeah. When do you expect François Hollande visit?
François Hollande, probably never, but maybe once he is out of power. But if you look at how he has dealt with his relationship with the United States and this really quite embarrassing manoeuvre of contributing to Evo Morales' jet being forced down in Austria, then I mean, I don't expect any support there. I'd be pleased to receive it and keep an open mind, but I don't expect any support, unfortunately, from Mr. Hollande.
You're in this very particular situation where you're cut from the outside world, and in the same time you're linked to the numeric world. Would you say that you are the first Homo digitus?
It's an interesting question whether other people are in that position. There's possibly some people with autoimmune diseases who have people who are under leukemia treatments and have no immune system, and they're stuck in hospital for a few months. I don't know, for 2 years, possibly.
That's a good definition somehow.
Yeah.
You must be one of the most monitored and tracked people on this planet. How can you be sure that your communications aren't intercepted?
Well, I am sure they are intercepted.
How do you deal through?
Fortunately, before I started running WikiLeaks, my previous expertise was being in a cryptographer. So I'm a specialist in secure communications. In terms of electronically, actually, you can increase levels of security and confidence, but not perfect. And we know the National Security Agency intercepts. If you order a computer, the National Security Agency will modify it in the post before it gets to you. They have special deals even with the chip companies like Intel.
Yeah.
So that can be quite hard to trust electronic equipment. But there's other ways. I mean, you can do certain things using, I don't want to say exactly, but
of course.
And we put that to effect in the Edward Snowden operation when we moved him from Hong Kong to safety in Russia. And that's quite interesting when you think that all this surveillance effort is being conducted against that embassy. And we had the greatest intelligence manhunt the world has ever seen for Edward Snowden, with the most sophisticated intelligence agency the world has ever seen. And yet we were still able to pull that off. Why? Because, well, despite for all that sophistication, there are still some techniques that you can use to get past it.
Was it your biggest challenge to get Snowden out of Hong Kong to Russia? And
no,
it was very funny and very ironic.
Yeah. I think any intelligence agency, let alone media organization, would be proud of having done that.
Yeah.
And we're proud of having achieved it. It's correct to say that we were working at the best of our ability.
Yeah.
That we really did have to, pull together our greatest concentration to not make a mistake, because a single tiny mistake could mean the end of someone's life.
Yeah. In 2011, some papers like the New York Times, The Guardian, Der Spiegel, El País, and Le Monde in France condemned your decision to publish the totality of US diplomatic cables, arguing it was a danger for the safety of certain sources. If you had to do it again, would you do it again?
Absolutely. This was a PR ploy by The Guardian, which it fostered on the other news organizations, because it revealed the decryption password in violation of our contracts in a book that it published. So it was trying to make some blame shifting. But our analysis of the situation was that this material was very important for the public to have. It was fueling election cycles, political debates, revolutions, and we believed that individuals needed to have it, and not just the intelligence agencies and so on who had read that password in the Guardian book. And we've been proven right. The US government has said under oath not a single person came to physical harm as a result of that publication. So we have been vindicated in our decision making. And that said, I would even go further. All those newspapers, including Le Monde, censored material from publication in violation of their agreements. And they did so not for humanitarian reasons, but for political reasons or fears about libel and so on. We've well documented the over-censorship of that material.
So would you say these newspapers are compromising somehow with
they are compromised for sure. And it's a natural thing. It's a very natural thing to happen. And I understand very well the difficulties for journalists working in those organizations. But a big organization has many connections. A powerful media organization ends up sitting down socially with other powerful people, and economically with economically powerful groups. And so its ability to act as an independent actor to the public becomes compromised. That's simply a fact.
But isn't it a journalist's ethical duty to protect his sources?
Absolutely, yeah. We protect our sources. The argument is that we didn't protect the political informants of the US embassies. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. No, but I was thinking of the journalists working for all these newspapers like Le Monde,
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
That they had some obligation to protect WikiLeaks as a source.
Yeah.
And also by proxy, allegedly Bradley Manning as a source. Yes, they did. Sure they did. But I mean, some of them have done a bit better, not really those five. Le Monde has occasionally done some good things. It's one of these things where you have a large enough organization, it doesn't have an ethical code. Individuals have ethical codes. Really, large organizations, ethics is not what drives them. It's the maintaining institutional power within the environment that they operate.
I read you would like journalism to become a scientific discipline. What do you mean exactly?
Well, in science, and I have a background in science, we want to prove that what we're saying is true.
Yeah.
Not just because of the strength of our rhetoric, but because other people can independently see it. And so when you engage in a scientific experiment, you get some results, and you write it up, and you say, hey, this experiment leads me to believe this conclusion. And I publish the experiment and its results, and I publish the conclusion. But you can make a different conclusion because you have the experimental data. And that way, everyone else can judge the accuracy of your thinking when you come to a conclusion. And sadly, most print journalism is a bit like propaganda, really. It's not a proper intellectual discipline because other people can't check the accuracy of your conclusions. So there was a good reasons perhaps once for doing that when you just had printed press, because you couldn't put all the information that you used to come up with a story, the whole interview, for example. You couldn't put that into the newspaper. But we have the internet now. You can actually put all your source data on the internet, and then people can check what is going on, or they can come up with a different conclusion. So that's been the methodology that WikiLeaks has conducted over the last 7 years. We've never got it wrong. We've never published something that is untrue, so that's the best record in the business. And part of that reason is because we can't. You know, that we will be discovered because of this method, and that creates a self-discipline on us.
Besides, what would you say is the biggest triumph of WikiLeaks? Is it the destabilization of different states or politicizing the internet?
Well, the biggest triumph, you know, it's a narrow perspective, but I'm a publisher in the end. The biggest triumph is that we kept publishing and that we're still publishing. And despite this very significant attack by over a dozen different US agencies, which is ongoing, demands by the Pentagon that we stop publishing, we destroy everything we're going to publish, we stop our operations with whistleblowers, a banking blockade involving Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, Western Union, Diners Club, Discover, etc. That we haven't fired anyone, and we're still publishing. There's actually not so many media organizations who can say that, let alone ones in this situation. If you ask about, in terms of concrete outcomes, well, you can look to elections, you can look to what happened in Tunisia, which we're involved in. That's probably the single most significant concrete outcome. More diffuse outcome is probably more significant, which is the politicization of the internet, especially internet youth. And those people might remember that transition that happened from the beginning of 2010 to the end of 2010 and through the beginning of 2011. And we were intimately part of that. People on the internet were taking our publications, spreading them, helping to stop the censorship of them, seeing this battle take place in front of their eyes on the internet. So the internet became a space where geopolitics happens. And young people felt very caught up in that and caught up in trying to protect us.
You've given your life to destabilizing institutions and organizations that become less powerful. How do you stop WikiLeaks from becoming one of them? Yeah,
well, we're nowhere near that. Nowhere near that position. We're still a small publisher.
Well, you might go.
It's always possible. I agree. It's always possible, but our market niche, if you like, is publishing information that others will not publish. We are the publisher of last resort, where journalists or other media organizations feel that they are under too much pressure to be able to safely publish, then we publish. Okay, we're also good at some other things. We're good at getting documents. We're also good at making them searchable and so on, and checking that they're true. But being in the business of the publisher of last resort always puts us on the edge. We are the vanguard of the free press, and that puts us into a position of conflict always. In order to be successful as an endeavour within the area in which we operate, we must constantly be in conflict, and that has a constraining effect because you'll have big powerful factions that are trying to stop you expand.
Leaving your political struggle on one side, and of course, apart from your family, what is the thing that you miss the most from the outside world?
Well, I'm a bit hesitant with this question because, you know, in some ways, I don't want to convey a sense that I am suffering or
that would be acceptable.
That life is, that's true, but other people are also suffering, but I don't want to convey some sort of sense that it is natural or just, that publishers that stick to what the First Amendment says in the United States, should be hounded by the US government into a very difficult position. In some ways, my position here is the envy of all national security reporters. It seems absurd to say it, but it's true. I mean, embassy, there are no police. There are no British police, there are no Ecuadorian police. There cannot be under the Vienna Convention. There are no subpoenas. So that in some ways it is the envy of national security journalists to be in such a position. Of course, I miss the sun, but on the other hand, I did make a conscious choice to follow this path because I find the things that I involved in my work are so personally satisfying and would be so personally dissatisfying to not proceed in the way that I am.
Are you still convinced internet can make the world a better place?
I am convinced it can make it a worse place. I'm also convinced that it is only the internet that can stop it becoming this bad place.
Yeah.
And you can become a neo-Luddite and you can perhaps go off to Byron Bay or Africa surfing, and take yourself away from civilization. But if you do that, you cease to become a meaningful component in resisting what is going on. So it just accelerates. So I think we have to use what we have available to us. And what we have available to us, the greatest sort of tool of emancipation is the internet. It is also the greatest potential threat for the removal of serious liberties that we have enjoyed since the Enlightenment. And it is the clash of these two which makes this time very interesting.
And just for the fun of it, I'm sure you're aware of it, but on June the 6th, the CIA opened official Twitter account. Do you think that's is good for freedom or bad for social network, social media?
Well, I mean, they are monitoring social media in many different ways already. You know, the CIA is already there, but I guess at least now people can also follow the CIA, right? That's,
I have a gift for you. It's a French dictionary called Le Petit Robert, and you just entered in it this year's edition. Unfortunately, you're in between Bashar al-Assad and Assad, I don't know what, a Babylonian king, but still, you're in it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.